Thank you all for being here. First and foremost, my name's Cyrus Mooney. I'm the events and program lead for the Bend Chamber. Just have a few quick introductory comments to start us off for this evening. I want to say that this event is made for the community, but it's also made by our community. And the Chamber's so excited that this is a part of who we are and what we do, and you're going to see that tonight. So again, thank you for being here. Also think that this program is such a great reflection of what it looks like when community members are willing to sacrifice their time, money, energy, and resources for making this place that we all call home so special and retaining that culture. And with that, I want to introduce one of our strongest partners in making this opportunity possible, our MC for the night, Mr. Brian Ladd.
Thanks, Cyrus. He took over this event just before our last one and is really giving it some legs. So the Chamber of Commerce, thank you for all you that have been involved. Katie and I were just talking. We had this idea a couple years ago, and Katie's like, I know how to make things happen, and well, here we are. So thank you for all coming. Everyone has a little bit different origin story on why they wanted to get involved, why they wanted to make this happen. For me, it's about a proper welcome to the Bend community. And if you've been here a long time, it's a re-welcome. Especially during the pandemic times with our masks on, we perhaps didn't do a good enough job saying the word welcome and thank you for coming. And with growth, there's challenges. But with challenges, there's a lot of opportunities. So what we're trying to do is make sure that the dialogue around what's happening stays open and productive, because Bend has continued to create and recreate what we are as a community for the last, well, Kelly Cannon Miller is going to go into it for the last 9,000 years, but the last 120 in particular. But I'm extremely proud to see the city's involvement. We've got so many good people involved, but let's just go through a few housekeeping items today to get started. And can we just go to that first slide? So so there's the introduction. That's kind of what we're about. We're going to also go into the origin of Bend and the key markers of growth, because a lot of us have misconceptions about what Bend is and what our economy is made of, and we've got some extremely talented critical people to our community that are going to go over that tonight. We have an amazing panel of established and engaged community members that we're going to go over tonight as well. And then we've got Eric King, who's the city manager. So the fact that he's here to help explain what the city does is going to be great. And then we're going to talk about growth. We've got the long-term planning manager for the city of Bend. We've got the director of Envision Bend here. So we've got a lot on the agenda. But as I say that, I want everyone to be loose and comfortable. So continue to go get beers at the bar. Talk with your neighbor, stretch your legs. Don't feel this is not a lecture. You're not pinned down. We're going to try to keep this open and fun while you're here. So let's keep it light. Let's have some fun up here. But yeah, get to know everybody and take care of yourself, which means a beer in Bend. And so let's start. Do we have the mentee poll? So this is something we've tried and stumbled with in the past, but let's try again, because Garrett and Cyrus have put a lot of time into this. If you could point your phone, we're all used to this now because of the pandemic. I'm sitting on another microphone. Everyone knows what a QR code is now. Sorry. So what this is going to do is this is going to come up with a question. And I believe our first question, is everyone getting it on their phone? Great. It's working. So I believe this is based around how long you've been in Central Oregon. And the reason we're having these is what I want everyone to understand is that we all have a little bit different framework. And this is an interesting one. So Bend is different for everyone. For someone who is newly retired and arrived in Bend 6 months ago, their vision of what Bend is and what it should be 5 and 10 years now, it may be very different from someone who just moved here and has a young family and want to buy their first house, or has a business with growth plans, but they can't hire someone because that person can't find a house. So we don't have an agenda here, but what we do have is an open discussion, and hopefully we can keep in mind that everyone here has a little bit different tint to their glasses on how we're looking at the town. And this is really interesting. What this is really encouraging to me, besides the people that have been here a long time wanting to come for beer, it shows that people are still engaged and still proud to be a Bend citizen. If they're still showing up at Bend's events like this and they've been here 10 plus years and they want to talk about what it means to be a Bend citizen as opposed to just a Bend resident, I think that's an awesome endorsement. So let's jump to the next one. What main reason brought you here? It's working. Lifestyle. Isn't this cool? Lifestyle, work, nature, recreation, mountains, business opportunities, good place to raise kids, quality of life. I'm trying to keep up. To escape, that's a new one. Okay, let's jump on to the last question. What's your favorite aspect of Bend? Awesome. I love the one that keeps on staying in the center there. Outdoors, community, nature, opportunity, water, weather, sun, community, intention, small town, acceptance. That's a pretty cool collection of words. So let's get on with this. We're all here for the right reason. So that's who we are. I just wanted to start quickly with a newspaper from I pulled this up. Where did I pull that up? Anyways, this was, I believe, from 1994. This is when we shut down Bend's last sawmill. Was that the year? Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. It talked about 90 employees out of work, the sound of the sawmill shutting down for the last time, and that air of desperation about not knowing if Bend would go on. There was a saying back then that the last person who leaves town needs to shut off the lights. And the reason I bring this up is because Bend is a very intentional community. There's a lot of towns that have faced the same challenges that Bend has, but they didn't come together to redefine and recreate what we are. And we're likewise at another crux of what it means to be Bend as we cross the 100,000 person mark. We have a diverse economy and we're dealing with some pretty big city issues right now. And I think we're at another one of those moments where we need to come together as a community and have those lively discussions about how we move forward as a community. So thank you for coming. And to start, I'm going to hand off the microphone to two heavyweights. They're the dog and pony show here. Everyone always rates them as their favorite part of the agenda. We've got Kelly Cannon Miller, who's the director of Deschutes Historical Museum. And Damon Runberg, who was just promoted. He is the chief economist for Business Oregon. So let's welcome them, and they'll tell us a little bit about the history.
Thank you, sir.
Come on. Get out of here.
Come on, we're the favorites.
Yeah, so this is our third time doing this, actually, and so we've tried out all of our jokes multiple times, so you guys are going to get the perfect, funniest one.
We're kind of recorded by Netflix, so.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Because, you hear the words economist and historian, and you're like, this is going to be outrageous.
And we are that
one's
outrageous.
new. You like that
it's
one?
Great, yeah, that is good.
Thank
the
you
other
very
one
much.
is my other favorite one that I came up on the fly. I think the first time we did this was to remind everyone that if you have not been to the High Desert Museum, please go see Kelly there. They put on a great event, great shows, and you could learn a lot about wrong museum. Da-dung.
Ba-da-da-da-da.
But you know what? They're all good museums. Go to all the
They are.
museums. It's a great way to support the community. But no, the Deschutes Historical Society is downtown, not off of Highway 97. So please go visit the museum
Yes.
because there's great things to see there. We're not here to talk about the museum necessarily, although we have great pictures from it.
We do, but I am going to throw in a shameless plug that this weekend is the Historical Haunt Walk that is almost sold out. So you know, if you want to do the Haunt Walk, you got to get on our website and find out how to get there.
Yeah, and the kids say it's awesome, so trust them. I should mute my phone. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, didn't mean to shame y'all. Okay, so what are we here for today? It is weird that the two of us are standing up here together, an economist and a historian, but yet I think kind of interesting because we can talk numbers and stories, and together it's a happy marriage of telling the story of our community at Bend, Oregon. So before white settlers came here, presumably people were here, right, Kelly?
They were here. Go
Okay.
figure.
Yeah.
So being such a young city, one of the things that we hear a lot at the museum is, well, you know, especially if they're from Europe or if they're from back east, it's like I tell them how old our building is. It was built in 1914, and they're like, pfft. I'm like, you need to reframe your perspective that some of the oldest archaeology in the North American continent is happening within an hour and a half of you. This is a place that was a confluence of a lot of folks. The Molalla from over the Cascades, the Klamath from the south, the Northern Paiute from the east, and the Warm Springs Tenino people from the north. So lots of activity coming through here. And one of the things is that there's a lot of obsidian here. We're very volcanic, and there are portions east of town known as glass buttes. And I like to tell people that our first economic export was actually that obsidian. And so science is amazing, and you can tell from an arrowhead what volcanic eruption it came from. So there have been flakes of obsidian and obsidian arrowheads found as far north as Alaska. But then most recently, there is a flake of obsidian that was found in a 9,000-year-old archaeological site, and I'm so excited that you remembered 9,000 years. That felt like the best win. Off under the banks of Lake Huron in the Midwest. So obsidian was our first economic export. Everyone.
Well, anytime someone tries to say that all we do is tourism here, remember, we export arrowheads as well.
Yes.
We did. It's actually illegal to take the obsidian from the flows. So you pay attention to those signs. The
Yes.
Forest Service gets angry with you
Yes.
if you take those. So
Also
don't do
illegal to take the arrowheads, but
that. Yeah, those two. Yeah.
that's a different lecture for y'all. That
So-
one has a test.
So we're going to fast forward time like dramatically because the time for me begins when the U.S. Census Bureau starts counting things. In fact, I was just in D.C. Last week for a talk that I was giving there, and I had some extra time, went to the Smithsonian, and the very first U.S. Census, anyone know what year that was? 1790, which is a weird year, but that was the first decennial census. To commemorate the first census, I wish I had a picture of this, it's so great. They made commemorative pitchers, like pouring water out of a pitcher with the state's populations on them. So as a nerdy economist historian, I was like, man, I wish they still did that every 10 years. I would buy those and have a great collection, but we
I
don't.
would buy them too.
Yeah.
We'd have a great collection
We
together.
would have
Yeah.
a great collection. But the first time that Bend shows up on the U.S. Census is the 1910 decennial census, and we had a whopping 536 people living in Bend back then. Pretty exciting, huh? That's a big population of maybe as big as my kid's elementary school. Pretty tiny, but I think back to homesteaders that might have been coming to Central Oregon or coming to the West generally, and I've been on the west side of the state before. It's fertile and moist and green, and you can grow things.
It's kind of nice.
Why would they have stopped here, not just kept going over the mountains? What caused people to homestead in 1910 in Bend?
Well, for one thing, the west side was kind of getting full, and so you still had all of this large amount of available land on this side of the Cascades. And there were also very large stands of ponderosa pine that timber cruisers, those were the guys that would come through and measure the trees and go, they were like you with numbers, taking it and figuring out how many board feet and ka-ching into numbers, what that would mean. And so they were coming for the timber, but then also for the available land. This was kind of the last ditch effort for the Homestead Act to get people to the American dream of owning a farm. That when 1910 happens, that's still like half of America either lives on a farm or is a farmer, and so the dream of having your own farm is still really, really, really strong then. And so the idea is you can come here, you can harvest the timber, send it off to market, but then behind that you can establish farms.
Well, evidently there's some powerful dreams because one of the most impressive growth rates you'll ever see happens with the next decennial census we get. In 1920, our population grows to almost 5,500 people for a growth rate of 910%. Now, as someone who looks at growth rates a lot, you don't often see 910%, so pretty impressive. It was, by the way, the most we ever had in a 10-year period in Bend. Sorry for all those who think that we've grown a lot in the last couple of years, nothing compared to that. Now, I will say it's easier to do it when the denominator is small, like 500 something, so it gives some grace there. But either way, we see that, and then the next decade after that, really fast growth. Again, we get to almost 9,000 people in that 20-year period of time, another 63% growth. So, this was an explosion in population. Bend went from basically like a hamlet to a real city in a relatively short period of time. So what was this wave that came into Bend? Who are these people? What were they doing?
Well, there was a lot of different people, and the big change is that it is in 1911. That's your marker because that's when the train comes. So oddly enough, for a long time, this whole eastern part of the state, there's very few roads and there's no train. So how do you get anything out? And so October 5th, 1911 is when the train goes choo-choo and comes into town, and then it's game on, right? Everything changes. And who you get are a lot of folks who are like you. They're entrepreneurs, they are business people, they see this as an opportunity. You get a ton of people right out of college who are looking for their opportunity in city government and in county government. So all kinds of people coming, but a lot of them are just straight up developers and involved in irrigation and how can you make the desert bloom, which is so when the railroad came in, James Hill came to town, drove a golden spike for real, just like this was a really big deal, and gave this manifest destiny-laden speech that they printed in the paper. And it was that we have done the hard work of bringing you the railroad. Now it's your turn to go make the desert bloom. And so that's who was coming here. Were folks who thought they could make the desert bloom. And they were so wrong.
But a dream, though, right? A dream.
You can dream.
Yeah.
You can dream big.
And they came here, and evidently many of them stayed because our population never went down from this point.
No.
What's really fascinating, though, is you sort of go through the next couple decades of development and growth in Bend, we see what I would have perceived as someone who sort of, has been surrounded by the aura of Bend's glory days of timber and wood products, that I would have thought sort of that 40s, 50s, 60s would have been this period of massive growth and expansion in Bend. And what we see from the numbers from the U.S. Census Bureau is that it actually was a period where we started to see our growth rate slow dramatically to the point we get to the 1960s, we only grew by 4.5% in that decade. Once again, a time that I thought was sort of the heyday of Bend. So what was it that caused this slowdown in our growth rate after this massive wave that we saw early on?
So it's a couple different things, but the boom and bust of the economy for those years, that there's this little hiccup called the Great Depression.
No,
it
you
kind
don't
of was
say.
a bummer, stopped some things. But also in 1937, there's this moment where the forester for the forest supervisor for the Deschutes National Forest presents everyone with a report that says, hey, guess what? If we keep cutting trees at the speed with which we're cutting trees, you're going to go off an economic cliff and the town will disappear. He did not mince words. That is basically how he said it.
We don't have unlimited trees?
We do not have unlimited trees. I'm very sorry to report. And everyone in town went, really, we're a little suspicious of you. We don't think you're telling the truth. And the Bend Chamber of Commerce, who brought you today's program, said, we're going to do our own study. And they did. And a year later, in 1938, they came forward and said, oh, shit, he was right. We're going to run out of trees. And they were begging the Forest Service to regulate and create sustainable yield programs so that they wouldn't run out of trees. And so really it's just a slowdown, though, from there to 1950. That's the first really scary point because that's when Shevlin-Hixson closes. So backing up a little bit, train comes in 1911. Two massive outfits from Minnesota follow that out here. You get Brooks Scanlon and Shevlin-Hixson. So when you see those names everywhere, that would be why. They bring all of their employees, a lot of employees with them from Minnesota, and they start logging. They were opposite the river from one another. That is Brooks Scanlon on the screen, and Shevlin-Hickson basically was where the Les Schwab Amphitheater is today. And in 1950, the moment came where there are no longer enough trees to sustain both, and Shevlin-Hickson closes. So right then, Christmas, right before Christmas, really? 5 minutes, I'm sorry.
Okay. It's all right. We'll just cut my whole part out.
No more numbers. So yeah, skip ahead really fast, but just right before Christmas, 1950, basically half of Bend lost their job.
Wow. So it turns out you don't see a lot of people move someplace when there's not jobs for them to be had. Okay, yeah, okay, we've learned that one. Well, that's sort of Bend's sort of story. We have had a history of a boom and bust cycle to some extent, although we've always trended up, and periods of growth punctuated by periods of economic downturn that have caused slower growth. We move into an interesting period I like to call the Lycra period of time, when people started wearing spandex in Bend. This is one of my favorite images from the Nordic team at Mount Bachelor. If anyone knows or has a pair of these pants, I will pay anything for them. I'm just saying, if you have them, I will buy them off you. So this is a period of time where we start to get some notoriety for recreation. And Mount Bachelor opens in 1959, 1958. Sun River Resort was in the mid to late 60s. Black Butte was also developed in a similar period of time. So the idea of Bend as a outdoor recreation mecca started getting sort of built up at this time when the mills started closing. Was this like an organic thing to see this sort of outdoor thing, or was it pushed behind somebody? Were there some leaders in the community that really advocated for this?
Well, outdoor recreation had always been huge. Everyone who was coming here early on, it was kind of like you could have your cake and eat it too. They were also outdoor enthusiasts and really enjoying the space. You had a very active Scandinavian ski community behind the Skyliners who actually did things like brought the national ski races here.
They brought the Lycra?
They brought the Lycra. Sorry about that. So that kind of kept to reinforce those people. But then you had visionaries like Bill Healy, who was behind getting Mount Bachelor going. So people who were enjoying it themselves saw the moment to make it a business opportunity.
And we all benefit today. So we move through this period. A lot of folks in this room probably start showing up around this time. Really massive growth in the 2000s, 90s and 2000s. And what's really fascinating is previously in my old hat, as the regional economist who looked at labor trends, employment trends across the region, I would constantly hear people talk about Bend's timber to tourism transition, this idea that we were a timber town and then we've moved into tourism and that's all we do, and that's sort of the end of the story. And there's some truth to that to some extent. We just heard Kelly talk about the closure of these mills and how devastating that was to the community, and also simultaneously we see the development of this outdoor recreation industry that was pretty new at the time and actually started employing people. And we see this in the data if we sort of look more broadly at like the amount of employment in Bend that was in what we'd call sort of our goods-producing industries versus our service-producing industries. We see a complete flip-flop in the last 30 years, where we went from 28% of our employment locally in producing goods, manufacturing things, making widgets, right? Not making widgets, usually making windows and doors and other outdoor or wood products, but you get what I'm saying. We get to 2022, only 16% of our economy is built on people making things. And then the inverse, so where does that decline come from? 15% of our employment in the 70s was in, serving service sector businesses, and now 50% as of 2022. Massive transition, and this is the type of graph where people go, man, we just turned into a tourism economy, that's it. But the story is far more complex and I think much more encouraging than just this sort of idea of timber to tourism. Tourism, I like to say, is one of the things that greased the wheel for Bend becoming a more diverse economy, the one that it is today. Raise your hand really quick. Did you move to Bend after first being a tourist? Were you a tourist before moving here? That's fewer hands than I thought. Normally it's like 95% of hands. What the heck did you do before moving here? How did you know about Bend? Okay, you might have read it in a magazine. That was like half the hands. Normally it's 95% of the hands. The tourism industry has been amazing for helping to diversify our economy because it's incentivized folks to come here, bring their businesses with them, bring their skilled labor with them, et cetera. And we see that translate into that transition when we break down where the service jobs have grown from. When we think service jobs, we're thinking people, sliding beers across bar tables, cleaning hotels, et cetera. In the tourism industry, that's not the case. As a share of our total economy, the leisure sector has been unchanged since the 1990s. It has not grown as a share of our economy in 30 years. Really interesting. But what has grown are these top two sections here. We see that healthcare has grown significantly as a share of our total employment in Bend specifically. We are now a healthcare hub for the entire region, with St. Charles and other healthcare providers really pulling in care from a lot of rural places in the state of Oregon. The other one is at the top there. Professional business services went from 6% up to 12%, doubled its market share in the last 30 years. This is that professionalization, sort of the white-collar jobs. A lot of people like to say, tech's in here. They are, but there's more to it than that. We got people doing marketing, people doing engineering, architecture, all the things. A lot of the folks in this room are in that top section there. Today, our economy, our industry composition looks a lot more like San Diego, California than someplace like Flagstaff or Vail, which shocks a lot of people. I think a lot of people think we are a tourism town. And I like to say we do tourism, but we're not just exclusively a tourism town. We're both. So that gets us to the modern era, where we are today. And it says here, 2020, we were at 99,178. I'll give you a little sneak peek into the reality of today. We are now over 100,000 people. Yay!
Yay!
Whole numbers feel nice. But a couple, one other observation you'll see from there is that we are at a point where we talk about growth the most in the community. A lot of people are frustrated with the pace of growth that we've seen, and yet our growth rate is declining pretty significantly from what we had seen the last few decades. So this is actually, and guess what? The next decade's got to be even slower than the last one. And so we're in a period right now where we're seeing slower growth again, but because we're getting larger, we have more of these conversations to address the growth that we're seeing. So Kelly, could you just give it a quick example of what the heck are we seeing here to sort of epitomize growth in this picture?
You're actually seeing the Old Mill District, and up top is when the mills closed. So that's just before the Old Mill District kicked off basically they were renovating an industrial waste site. You had these massive mills that had been milling since 1915 and using the river that way. And so how do you rejuvenate a place like that? So up top is the Old Mill District in like 1994, and then down below is a more recent aerial shot of it.
Yeah,
so
just a classic example of redevelopment in a way that has sort of grown with the community, and also just what a community asset to have the parks and the green space and the river back as well. So we lost the jobs and the employment, but we also get a lot of community benefits from it.
From that.
Can you quickly, with our last minute here, tell me a little bit about this little sign right here?
Sure. So the whole idea of being 100,000, I know a group of people who would have been really happy about that, and they were the Bend Emblem Club. So if you see at the bottom, you know how you see the name Bend in circles everywhere? That actually dates back to 1912. It's like marketing 101 genius that you can have this thing that so outlived you. And it was the Emblem Club. And that was their emblem, and it was a small group of business folk. They were all white men, let's be honest. They were all white guys. But they were the dreamers. They were the visioneers. You like how I did that? For the envisioning part that's coming up next.
So when did they think we were going to get to 100,000, though?
They swore an oath to wear the emblem every day until we hit the population of 100,000. They thought we would get there by 1937.
We missed it by this much, just that much.
Yeah, so close.
Yeah, we were so close.
I mean, the Depression, come on.
Yeah, that Depression, that happened a few years ago. So that, hopefully you learned a little thing or two about the history of Bend and our economy and how it's transformed through time. Kelly's going to stay up here, and we're going to invite our honored guests to come talk to these community leaders to hear more about what it's like to live and be in Bend and be leaders in this community, and invite you all to be leaders as well. But my time up here is done, so I'm going to stop talking and pass the baton. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. So you know how some people say if, a picture or it didn't happen for Damon, it's a number or it didn't happen. You're welcome. So the emblem club that was up on the side of the screen there, real quick, the words that were on the screen was their toast. That was how they ended their programs. And so I always like that you see now today the Be Nice, You're in Bend, Be Kind is a really big deal. And most people don't know that that was there from the very beginning with the emblem club. So, hi, Bev and Todd. This is like hanging out with Damon's really fun and all, and coming up with jokes, but being invited to talk to people who have memories that I love to tap into is a really special thing for me to be invited to this program. So if you could quickly introduce yourselves to the audience, that would be great. Do you have a mic, Bev?
I'm sitting on it. Is it on?
It's on.
Okay, I'm Bev Clarno. I first came to Central Oregon with my parents in 1942, and then I graduated from Redmond High School and lived down on the Columbia River and was gone for a long time living in Lake Oswego. And then my husband, whose roots were from here, a little place called Clarno, Oregon, on the John Day River, where his great-great-grandfather homesteaded in 1840. And my husband said, I've always wanted to have a cattle ranch in Bend. And I thought, I remember growing up here and irrigating and mosquitoes, and I don't want to go back. But I came back. Love is wonderful, isn't it? And ended up, I was going to law school, and I hadn't finished, so I worked in our Deschutes County courthouse and in the judges' chambers and whatnot. And someone said, why don't you run for office? And I'm glad I did then, because it was better to run for office then. And of course, I came back with a different last name, and someone saw me from high school and they said, gee, you're a nice lady, but we don't elect women over here. So I had to work really hard and got elected, and my husband and I lived east of Bend. And as I'd done all my life, I got involved in things in our community and still do that. So
And you are one of the toughest women I have ever met in my life. So thank you. And Todd.
Right. Well, I would just start by saying Bev Clarno is one of my favorite people in Central Oregon. She's just such a classy, good-spirited, and a hard-working lady that just truly moved the needle in our market. So what a privilege it is to be up here with you, Bev. My family came in 1916 to Bend and worked in some of those wood product areas you just saw on the screen. My grandmother, Grace, graduated from Bend High School in 1927. My mother graduated from Bend High in 1957. My father in 1955. I graduated from Bend in 1980. My children, Joe and Abby, graduated in 2011 and 2013. And if history repeats itself, we're hoping to have some grandkids one of these days. And maybe 20 years from now, we'll have another graduation in the Bend School District. So we were a product of the Bend School District and very proud to be so. I was born in 1962 on Hospital Hill. Hospital Hill is where the Phoenix Inn is today, downtown. And like I said, I graduated in 1980, went to school in Southern Oregon, along with a lot of the peers that I graduated with. Most people, as Kelly indicated, in 1980 moved away from Bend. There wasn't much going on in Central Oregon because the economy was in pretty rough shape. Graduated from 1984 in Southern Oregon State in Ashland, and worked in investments for 4.5 years up in Portland. Came back and joined a family business. My father was in construction, heavy civil, and worked with that family business for about 10 years, and then, or about 15 years, and then started a company here in Bend called Taylor Northwest. And so we've been actively involved in heavy construction and land development as well. Privileged to have both of our children, been married to my wife for 37 years, who's also been in Bend with us. And then our two children, Joe and Abby, are now part of our development company, and we're just really lucky to have them here. So been in Bend for quite a while, and I'm just so excited about what's taking place right now, and glad I'm here.
Yeah, you've been here for a minute.
Yeah.
So that, if you're looking at the population growth and you see that moment in 1993 when the last of the milling is gone, and it's hard to explain to folks how different the community was, where you have the sounds of the whistles, you have the sound of the mill, you have the smell of sawdust, you have the old stories about you don't hang your clothes out on the clothesline because they would get covered in sawdust, to the city that we see today, where there's literally portions of this town that did not exist 20 years ago. But that sense of community that all kept popping up on the screen, you guys have lived through seeing us transition from a small city of 20,000 people to 100,000 people, and the pressure of going from the rural to urban. And yet, how have we managed to keep that sense of community so strong? Because back in the day where you knew you needed something done and you knew the people to call to get on the phone and make it happen was something that we were talking about last week, and yet that sense of community is still really strong. So I would like each of you to share a project that you were involved in that you feel highlights that sense of community, and then how have we kept that going?
Well, as far as a project would go, a thing that I was involved in that I feel very good about was getting our OSU campus here, and I had a good opportunity in the legislature to make that happen. And all the people, I think back when we had Kochi, remember that? Kochi was our first attempt at higher education here, and we knew our kids were leaving and going to other places to college and not always coming back because there were no jobs here. So we wanted to have higher education here, and then we got our community college expanded and got our OSU. And being in the legislature and having the opportunity to help bring that here is one thing that I feel so good about for us, because I'm raising a great-grandson, and he's going to go to Corvallis, and he's already decided he's an absolute beaver, even though a lot of his friends are a duck, but we like them both, right?
How about you, Todd?
Well, first of all, I graduated from Leadership Bend in 1993. I was in the first class that, and chambers in most of the cities, not only in the Northwest, but throughout the countries, have gone through these ebb and flows. And this chamber, and thanks to Katie's leadership and Talina and the group that are here tonight, really has brought the chamber to a completely different level, and that's why most of you are here. We have events like this. So I would say I have a couple accomplishments that I'm really proud of. One is being a part of Leadership Bend and being able to be in support of the chamber. And if there's 25 people that graduate from that class and 10 of them become active in our community, it's really a delight to see those people again and just be a part of who they are and what they bring to the table. Can I add a couple?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of these.
But then we're going to go to Vince.
All right, I won't
okay.
go to there. But I would say that we talked about Bill Healy earlier. Well, the Bill Healy Bridge was really a controversial piece of infrastructure. Half of our community didn't want to see a bridge go over the Deschutes River, and so there was a group of local community members that came together to work really hard on, and we created at that point a nonprofit called Celebrate Bend. And everybody came together and worked hard door to door to start talking about how important that piece of infrastructure was to go from east to west. And at that point, it was Colorado. And so that was a project that took 9 months, and quite a few community members came together to lobby for that, and it voted in November and passed with flying colors. It was probably one of the first projects I had been a part of that required a vote, and understood the effort that it takes. It actually makes a difference to knock on somebody's door and explain to them why this piece of infrastructure was so important.
So one of the things that occurs to me over and over again reading about the history of Bend and different projects over time is that nobody living here was ever just doing one thing. They were always involved in all these other things or grew into other positions. And so one of those people that is a name you need to know Because how many of you had the Parks and Recreation Department in your list of things that you love about this place? Vince Guenna is the name that you need to know there. And so in the 50s, he was actually hired. He was from Brooklyn, New York. He was a ball player. And you look at photos of this guy, and he's like movie star chin, movie star physique. I'm a ball player. I'm a World War II vet. He was on a bomber crew that got shot down. He was a guy, right? And he gets hired to come coach soft baseball in Bend because we needed a winning baseball team, and that was all important. And so he comes to work with the American Legion baseball team. But he becomes the director of the Parks Department, which at that point was under the city's auspices. It wasn't a standalone district. But share with me why Vince is so important.
Well, I think Vince is important because of what the city has basically told us time and time again of how important this open space is. And that the fabric of Central Oregon is really built around these great parks. And today, if you pay your property taxes, you know that 9% of your property tax goes to Bend Park and Recreation. So roughly on a budget of, I think it's roughly $40 or $50 million of income they get from property taxes. Back when Vince Guenna was there wasn't that type of money. There wasn't hardly any money for that. A lot of the parks early on were built by community members. And I remember as a kid, Vince would call my father Hap and say, Hap, and he was in the construction business and just happened to have bulldozers and those things. And he'd say, we're going to build a park, and I need you to be here on Saturday with your equipment to help us build a park. And Hap would say, all right, well, I'll see it. No, I need you there on Saturday to help build this park. And it wasn't just Hap. It was calling Brooks Scanlon. It was calling other community members. That's how they built parks. And it truly was people coming together from the earth moving to the planting to all the different components of building a park, the playground equipment. It was really amazing. I remember as a young person, I thought the tenacity that person had to really bring the parks forward. And every time I drive by a park, I think of, there was Vince Guenna Stadium, which was the ball field out on the southeast part of Bend. So truly a courageous person and somebody I often think about.
He did get us a championship too.
Yes.
I think 58. The baseball championship was ours. Bev, go ahead.
I think the neat thing when we were talking about this, when we first had a discussion about this, is we're like, how did just a handful of people get everything done in Bend? And to me, it goes back to our pioneers. When people moved into an area like this, everybody helped everybody build a barn. You meet and have a barn raising. Well, when the Kids Center needed to be built, the Rotaries and the other organizations in Bend all came together with all these volunteers and built the Kids Center for abused children. These are how we did things in Bend, still do. Just need more volunteers all the time.
Which is where you lot come in. Right? Yeah, of keeping that sense of organization. And you do see the service organizations' names show up time and again. Parks even before Vince was here in the 50s, that kicks off, back in 1922, the Women's Civic Improvement League is to be thanked for Drake Park, the Mills owned that piece of property, and one of the things under contention for that piece of property was a paper pulp mill. We would not have all moved here if a paper pulp mill was there, because they're lovely and smelly. And then Shevlin Park also happened in 1922, and that was an outright gift from Shevlin Hickson to be named after Tom Shevlin in his honor. So you do have this recurring theme all through our history of people being involved in service organizations of some kind, be it the Chamber, be it the Rotary, or any of the service organizations coming together and making projects happen. I'm glad you brought up the barn building analogy. So how are we doing on time?
11 minutes.
I have 11 minutes? I don't even know what to do with 11 minutes. So how do you recommend people stay involved and keep this community momentum moving forward now that we're past 100,000 people? Now that we're more urban, it's not as easy as just knowing who you call. How do you find the ways to get involved?
I don't know. They've always seemed to find me.
Well, you're a little notorious, so.
But I think you look at the things that interest you and find organizations that are out there that obviously our paper and other organizations and places have lists of volunteer things that you can do. And anything to do with kids ever was easy for me. So whatever you're interested in, there'll be a place where you can help and be involved. And I think that's real important. And I think beyond that, can I talk about my number one pet peeve?
Yes.
Todd knows this. I don't like honking. Please don't honk. When you grow up in an area where I have, because I've lived in smaller areas than this, and then I lived in Lake Oswego, and I can tell you, the first time I was going down the Twilliger curves and some lady honked at me because I didn't see her and I got over in her lane and she laid on her horn, I just cried all the way to work. That's just so rude, we just don't do that. And the only reason we should use our horn is to honk and wave hi at somebody. And I wish everybody would take a little more time going where you're going so you're not in one of these mad rush hurries. I know what you feel like. My son comes up here from San Diego and he drives like a bat out of hell and scares me to death. And it's just, I go, where are we going in such a hurry? So, I mean, just slow down and look around. It's a beautiful place. Enjoy it.
Yeah, roundabouts are not a physics challenge. Yeah.
What was the question again?
How do you build a barn?
Okay,
How do you build a barn? We need a lot of barns right now. Because we do. There's a lot of things ahead of us.
Well, I think Bev indicated a couple things that were really important. That's find something that you're passionate about, and then encourage not only yourself but others to get involved. And there are so many wonderful places in Central Oregon to give your time and your energy. And if you have treasures you can give as well, a little money along the way, that's great. But just your time is really important. And I think that's what we all lose perspective because everybody's busy. So with that said, we came up with a couple of thoughts. I talked when we met at Starbucks, and that was if you had to sign an affidavit when you come to Central Oregon, and that would be whether you've lived here or you just arrived in Bend, what would be the top 10 values that you would pledge to be here? So we reached out to 20 different community members, and some of these were a common theme, but some of them were, I think, pretty good to think about. First one came from Bill Smith, and he said, "Be nice, you're in Bend." Fair enough. Second one we just heard about from our friend Bev, "Don't honk." Pick up after your dog. Smile and say hi to strangers. We were all a stranger here at one point. Pick up litter if you see it. Put more in than you take out. Keep your middle finger out of the public.
Who said that one?
My daughter. Donate your time or treasure. In a day that we live in today, be patient. And say thank you more than not. So, to Bev's point, if we're going to raise barns together, I think we have to work off some values, and I'm hoping that those values stay strong. They've been a lot to us so far, and if you're here, think about one or two of them.
That was great. Thank you. Is that the...
You've got a few minutes.
Oh, we do? Okay. So Bill Smith, in case you don't know, that would be the genius behind the Old Mill District, correct? So among the people that really did help transform an area that with riverbed bank restoration, quick thing for you all to know. Nobody growing up here floated the river prior to, like, what, 95, Eric? Do you remember? Later, 2000s, it was not a thing that happened. You did not float the river. And a big piece of that was that a big chunk of the river was all the log pond for the mills. So it was off limits completely. But so no floating the river until the 2000s. That's a relatively new thing. So Bill Smith is among the people who are really important in transforming our area, along with Vince. Another one would have been Sister Catherine of St. Charles Hospital. You mentioned Hospital Hill. So do you remember when the hospital was moved east of the Butte and what the attitude was for that? If you could share that.
Well, everybody thought they moved to Redmond because it was so far from the downtown core, but the vision to pick up 60 or 100 acres at that point, as far out as they did, and it was the tallest building in Bend. You know, at that point here, we had a 5-story building, and that was really uncommon. And you look back now, and it was brilliant, the move that they made, and the community board members at that time. So, and Sister Catherine was a huge part of that. She was a true visionary in Central Oregon and provided this healthcare system that served everybody. This wasn't based on a private entity that owned it, which it is today, as you know. It's a community-owned hospital. We all own that hospital. So we have to cherish the values that they've put together there and what they've done.
And support it. So that was 76. So 1976, there were only farms east of Pilot Butte. And so the idea that you would buy the hospital and put the hospital out there was just completely bonkers to them. But very then quickly, you get Mountain View High School behind there. See, and just like that, it's gone. And the little sign saying, you have 2 minutes left. But yes, Sister Catherine was another visionary. Bev?
Yes, I think she was instrumental not only in doing what she did for St. Charles, but for the whole community and making us all realize that you're not going to smoke anywhere on St. Charles ever, ever, ever. I remember her saying that because at that time it was just beginning to be obvious that smoking was so bad for us, and she was a real pioneer in pointing that out. So.
Well, thank you both.
I have one other comment, which reminds me of the river. A good historian in Central Oregon, if you haven't met him, you should at some point, is Jim Kroll. And Jim Kroll's been instrumental in our community, worked at Brooks Scanlon when he came as a PR person, and along with Bill Smith. Bill Smith worked for Brooks Scanlon and then got started in the development side. But Jim was telling me the story, and some of you may have heard this. The rivalry was he played basketball, and he was my size, 5'8", so pretty short. But they would play Redmond all the time, and then they would just, fight back and forth on who would win. And well, one year in his junior year, they lost to Redmond, and there was this perception that Muir Pond was the drinking water for Redmond because it came down through the Deschutes all the way through Drake Park. So he has a memory of all the basketball players standing on the Galveston Bridge, peeing in the river, knowing that all that water was going to Redmond to all the people when they lost. So, great story about water.
He's going to be so happy you told that story. You have no idea.
So he's right. He's touched on a real rivalry.
I saw the little fist bump. Don't think we didn't see that.
I was going to be nice, but I can't remember what year it was, but we beat you in football before you were born. And Ben came up and burned with gasoline a big bee on our grass in front of our school, and I've never forgotten it.
No peeing in the river. It just became number 11 on the chart. Yeah.
Nice job, Kelly.
Thank you both very, very much. Passing the baton.
Wow. Is that on? Yeah. Wow. What an opportunity to share some of that oral history of what Bend is. And when I question how those cultural values are past 100 years at a time, I think stories like this are what do it. So these are the moments that, I could have never hoped for when we talked about getting this going, Telena and Michelle. And so with that, let's take a few minutes. We've got two remaining items. We've got some really fun stuff coming up. But if you guys want to take just 2 minutes, use the bathroom, grab a drink, and we'll just get started in 2 or 3 minutes here, and we'll finish it up. Thank you. Hey, can you hear me? Hello, hello. Okay. Hello. Okay, everybody, I'm going to get started again. So thank you guys for your patience so far. We've got we have 2 more sections to talk about tonight. I think I lost the crowd. Never give a bathroom break? No, maybe I need to dance. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and move on. Everyone, I just want to, if we could just keep it down a little bit. We've got, sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but we've got a great next guest. What a great segue. When we were talking about barn building, it's interesting to think about what the different type of barns that are being built these days. I was just having coffee with Eric yesterday, who built a barn made out of hum kombucha. So the barns have changed shape and changed flavor over the years. And now we have Eric King. He is the city manager, and he's going to tell a little bit about what the City of Bend is, because I think we all have a little bit different opinions of kind of what Bend is, what the City of Bend is, and what their responsibilities are. So he has a really great synopsis on the role and the scope of Bend.
Brian. We'll cue up the slideshow here, back to the slides, but I just want to reflect on the presentations that we've had so far, which to me all just underscore the need to preserve our special culture in Bend. I mean, that's our secret sauce here in the city, is that we're an intentional community. We come to events like this, we get involved, we help shape this community, and we want our city government to reflect that value. And I am so thankful for the Chamber for putting this event on. I can't help but reflect. I have a 14 and 16-year-old, a freshman and junior, one at Bend High, one at Summit. I was at back to school night the other night, going to my son's classes. He's taking a computer science class, and we were saying, what are the projects that you're working on for your class? And the teacher said, well, we're making apps. And we said, well, what kind of apps are the kids making these days? Apps on your phone. She said, oh, well, one student is making an app, so when you're at a social function, it'll send you fake texts. So you can be off in the corner on your phone and not have to engage. And I'm like, oh, that is not good, right? So that is what we're devolving to, kids making fake texts so they don't have to connect with people. So we need events like this, and we need you all as ambassadors to preserve what makes Bend special, because it's real, right? Like, it's real that we have a force working against us. We have a community that wants, or a world that wants us to divide. We have a world that wants us to see two sides to everything. And I want to fight really hard to preserve that special sauce here in Bend, that culture. So let's talk about how we do that at the city government level. So we have a purpose statement that really tries to embody what you heard tonight, which is building on our past. We have this history. We don't want to forget about it. We want to stand on the shoulders of many before us to do great things. And really, it's that spirit of Bend that you heard about, of being a welcoming city, that I think that distinguishes us from a lot of cities east of the Cascades, right? Where they were just like Bend, resource-based. They kind of went through this period, and you can see evidence of that. Bend didn't follow suit. We said we want to be open. It was a mindset, that's what we want to preserve here today. Not just say if growth is good for growth's sake. No, we want smart growth. We want to build a community that maintains that intention. Serving the present is really all about the value of public service. So as a city government, we make it our intent to hire folks that's why they're there. They're there not because of the paycheck, because they believe strongly in giving back and being part of this community. And then this opportunity that you hear more about of shaping Bend's future. Again, huge opportunity with all this investment pouring into Bend. Let's make sure it's channeled in the right way. And I think we've got some good evidence of that. So you might hear, Bend, from the headlines of affordable housing. That's a huge issue. Of course, homelessness. One of the great things about this community is we take those problems head on. We lean in. I think it's part of our culture, but it's also just our geographic situation, our isolation. We're east of the Cascades, so we tend to be more resilient, more self-reliant. We sort of say we can figure that out. We don't sort of wait. We're not part of a metro area. We use the strength of our community to solve problems. So this is what you might hear about in the headlines, but let's really talk a little bit more about, let's dissect that. What is the role of the city? And we use this graphic, the backdrop of Mount Bachelor, to try to put it all together, where we list our 4 core services, starting with basic infrastructure. So the roads you drove on to get here, the sewer, the water. When it rains, hopefully it rains soon, goes into, some of that goes in the ground, that treating that stormwater, that's all part of our basic infrastructure that the city manages. Layered on top of that is public safety, police and fire. Layered on top of that is our governance services to ensure our council is part of that, our elected body, working with all of our staff to make sure that we're transparent, accountable, we're good financial stewards. And then layered on top of that is community and economic development. And that is really the shape of our city in terms of land, how land is being used. So everything from what you're going to hear about long-range planning and growth to once our urban growth boundary, the line that demarks where the city is versus rural, it's the stuff inside the line, zoning, all the planning, permitting, and then building safety and code enforcement, all that is part of that core service. What you see in the clouds are kind of those community values. It speaks to some of the 10 things, I love that, the top 10 kind of values that we have around making sure that Bend remains livable, that it's a nice community, that we preserve our culture. It's addressing this huge problem of housing and affordability. We don't want Bend to become a resort community. We want to make sure that we grow both out and up to accommodate our housing needs. It's our business community. We evolved from a resource base to now a more diverse economy. Let's make sure we keep that up. We don't become a one industry town that we're vulnerable to economic downturns. Social justice. I think this is something that as Bend, we are becoming more diverse. And I really kind of push back when people say, oh, Bend, it's not very diverse. No, we are. We're growing and changing, and I think we need to recognize and celebrate that diversity and welcome everybody to this community. And it's that mindset that is what Bend is built on that's taken it to the next level. And then the natural environment. You heard that in the video of preserving our public lands and making sure that Bend doesn't lose its sort of green space, open space. So I'll kind of walk through some of those core services now and then. So fire was our first public service, and it was a volunteer fire department right after the city was incorporated in 1905. And it, again, I think illustrates that spirit of Bend, of the community coming together. It was largely a volunteer-based program until the last 30 years, where it's been professionalized. We're now nationally recognized for our cardiac survivability. What that means is that if you have a heart attack in Bend, you're really safe because of our quick response time, our partnership with our police department, and just the level of training that our staff goes through. With police, same story, kind of that, really a small department, small town kind of feel, a sheriff in town, transformed to a nationally recognized department that focuses on officer wellness and really meeting folks or hiring a healthy team so that they can deal with all the trauma that we're experiencing. And I just want to take a moment and recognize both our police and fire for what they had to experience a few weeks ago with the shooting at Safeway. It's a testament to this community. It was a horrific event to go through, but it does embody that training that we are first responders. We serve our community. We walked right into that building, and I'm really proud of our folks. Thank you. So our other core services, utilities, water, sewer, stormwater. We used to take our water from Deschutes River. It was kind of referenced before Muir Pond, that dam that was created that provided both electricity and water, Bend Power and Light. The city took it over in 1926, and where Tumalo Falls is where our intake facility is for our surface water. That supplied us until the 50s. We then supplemented that with groundwater, so we have a dual water supply, which is very fortunate here in Bend. Sewer system, not a real glamorous. Our geography or geology is really difficult to put things in the ground, and so our sewer system, fortunately, kind of was discharged in that fractured basalt, and it took a while for us to have a centralized sewer system. And it was the community that came together in the 70s that built the plant that we have in that picture through a combination of local dollars and a vote, or federal dollars and a vote. And then transportation. So, we were a logging town that, was very much, the town was built on speculation, so a lot of developers that would come and plot it and sold it off. And so kind of a hodgepodge of infrastructure. So it's been a challenge as we've grown to be able to connect that infrastructure. So the roundabout has worked really well for us, and those kind of farm-to-market roads and building a spiderweb network that maintains that livability but moves the traffic around. Thank you to the voters that passed a $190 million transportation bond in 2020, right at the onset of the pandemic, that is allowing us to really transform our transportation system for all modes over the next 10 years. And of course, economic development. You heard that story of that transformation that took place from a resource base to a diverse economic base that we have here now. So let's talk about our government. So we have a council manager form of government, which is the most common form for cities, I would say small to about 250,000 in population. It's modeled after the private sector, where you have a council that's an elected body that sets administrative policies, and then a city manager, myself, that is like a CEO running the day-to-day operations of the city to really provide that clear separation and professionalism to run a city. And so here is our elected body. They are elected for 4-year terms citywide. Our charter is what governs the city of Bend, so that's like our constitution. That was formed in 1911, was our first charter. It's been changed 5 times, can only be changed by the voters. It was last changed in 2018, where voters said it's time, Bend has grown up enough that we want a directly elected mayor. So that has been the most recent change, as well as a little more compensation for the council. So we have 4 positions that are up here in November. So Mo Mitchell's position, that was a temporary, that was a filling a vacancy, as well as Steven Seagal. And as you know, Melanie Keebler is running for mayor, and Barb Campbell is running for her seat. Jenna Goodman Campbell, it's too hard to kind of go through all the positions, but we've got 4 positions that you'll see. So in Bend, I would say part of our story is, it's growing and changing, so our politics are growing and changing a lot. So there's a lot of change. Every 2 years, we have an election cycle with our council. We also have this community that's growing and changing that has these values. So the mechanism that we do that, at least in the short term, you'll hear about long-term planning with the Envision Bend. We go through a 2-year cycle of setting goals with council, and we align those goals to a 2-year budget. It's based on odd years starting July 1st to June 30th. So we're just about to go through an election cycle. In January, we will go through a retreat and set goals and a work plan to help take us to for the next 2 years and develop resources around it. I'm not going to go in through the detail of that. All of the information about our goals, our performance metrics, details on projects and work plans, all that's online that you can explore. But I want to really leave you with how can you have an impact? Because, again, building that culture of Bend is really about community engagement at the center of it. And our neighborhood system is really a big piece of that. So the city is divided into 13 neighborhood associations. So every square inch of the city is represented by a neighborhood. That's a great entry point. I think there's some information out on the tables about how to get involved and where your neighborhood is. And then we also have, if you really are more issue specific and are intrigued by some of those values I talked about, we have boards, committees, and commissions that represent those values, like our Environment and Climate Committee, a Budget Committee, Economic Development, Affordable Housing, Human Rights and Equity Commission, Planning Commission. I think all told, like 12 or 13 different committees. It's a great time to talk about it right now. We have several openings up are available on some of those committees. So if you're interested and you're inspired by this work, I really encourage you to fill out an application. Council makes those appointments to those boards, committees, and commissions. And it's typically for 2 or 4 year terms. So it really allows you to work with the elected body to shape this city. And then, of course, we are growing fast, and so we have lots of infrastructure projects, that transportation bond I mentioned. There's major road improvements that are going to take shape. So we have open houses and engagement opportunities. Help us shape this community through those investments. And then you'll hear about some of our land use, kind of where the city is growing. Where is it going to grow on the west side, on the east side? Is it going to grow up, going to grow out? Where are the jobs going to be? All of that is in the city's comprehensive plan, which you're going to hear more about. So there's also those, what I call ad hoc, kind of more project-based types of engagement. And if you do nothing else tonight, do this. Just go on your phone. If you want to be the screenagers, we call them in our house, and be on your phone, you can do that too. And you can get on Twitter. We're on all these things on social media, and we have a lot of information that we push out there. And we ask that you leave tonight just not saying, oh, that was interesting, and go off into your merry way, but hopefully you're inspired to stay engaged and be informed and be ambassadors for this culture that we're all trying to create and inspire to continue. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over.
What an amazing opportunity that Bend has to have someone of Eric's level leading our city. So if anyone has ever kind of seen how small governments work, it's usually not as inspired and organized and as great as what we have here. So we started with our history. We shared our cultural values. We told you a little bit about what the city does, how it operates, and what we'd like to do is end each one of these as a discussion about talking about a challenge that we are currently facing as a city. And it's kind of a downer note. The first time we talked about homelessness, the second time we talked about wildfires and water issues. But this is who Bend is. We talk about real issues, and this is kind of our handing off point where, we hand the microphone over to all the new citizens in Bend and say, these are the real things, the shine is off. You've been here a little while, and let's figure out how to make Bend a better place. And we take these head on. And so with that, we have the amazing, so this will be our last session of the night. We've got two great people here. We've got Laura Fritz, who's the executive director of Envision Bend, and Brian Rankin, who's the long-term planning manager for the city of Bend. And I think he was my Little League or T-ball coach for my son back in the day. What's up? Yep. I think, can we turn on? Yeah. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. You're all a very patient group here, so thanks for hanging in there with us. I'm Brian Rankin. I work for the City of Bend. I'm Long-Range Planning Manager.
Laura Fritz, Executive Director of Envision Bend. Welcome.
Okay, so I know Brian Ladd got you kind of pumped up about going negative. We're not really going to go negative here. We are going to try to stay positive. So when we designed this, let's just be clear, I work for the city. So we're going to cover some of the land use elements, kind of boring technical stuff, hopefully not. And then Laura's going to cover a really cool project called Envision Bend. So two different organizations we're going to share, and we're going to kind of organize ourselves by the spirit of 101, who, what, when, where, why, and how of growth. And I'm going to mention some nasty rumors and try to dispel them. So we're going to talk about one first of all. Oh, that growth. Who is the growth? It's those Californians. Oh, those Californians, they're taking Ben down here. Well, here's a little map of the people. This is 15 through census information, and from 15 through 2019. Counties that essentially are contributing to the growth in Deschutes County. And no color means nobody really moved here. And then the darker the color, and especially the red, means, a whole lot of people moved to Deschutes County. Well, of course, you see California on that map. And you see a whole lot of the West Coast. But you know who moves here the most? Any guesses? Oregonians. It's the Oregonians, folks, coming back. Well, it's their home state, assuming they were from that state in the first place. But I think this raises a kind of an interesting point in terms of who. Because we often talk about growth as an other, right? And we often forget that I'm growth. I'm the growth. I moved here. And by the way, if you were born here, you're also growth. From a demographer standpoint, growth comes from people moving in and people being born, right? And so we're all part of this. And I find that personally humbling when I'm angry at traffic. Oh, I'm the traffic. Angry at Mount Bachelor. What? Somebody else is getting that powder. Well, I'm that guy too. So I think it's in listening to the stories earlier, I think it asks and it begs for us to do better, right? To do better. Even though we're here, we can make this a better place, despite the fact that we are growing. So, Laura, do you want to talk about who is behind Envision Bend?
So I am excited to talk to you about the Bend Vision Project. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you about the organization that I work for and why we're the ones who are managing that particular project, so you have a little bit of context. So Envision Bend is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. some of you in the room, because there are people who have lived here more than 10 years, know us as Bend 2030. That is, in fact, the name of the first visioning project that was run by the City of Bend back in 2005 and 2006. So, 17 plus years ago. Our organization, Bend 2030, was formed as a nonprofit in 2007, really to serve as the champion and the steward of the community vision that had been created, to make sure that that plan became our reality, to try to make sure we brought the community together, to make sure those things in that vision were going to be what our community became, like OSU Cascades campus, or the four-year university campus was one of those things in that original vision. So Envision Bend was formed to be that champion and steward and really address the issues that our community was facing. So we've been in existence since 2007. Fast forward to today, our community has changed an awful lot in that time frame. And so there's been broad consensus in the last many years that we needed to revisit that vision and bring the community together again to revise it, update it, and make it reflect what our community wants for our next few decades. So,
Thank you. And also, we're going to shift here to really fun subject of land use. Ooh. And I just want to mention that in our land use, in the city's land use, it's regulatory, right? We're fundamentally a regulatory body. We're like land use cops, right? We bust you if you do this, we bust you if you do that. And we're also trying to keep everybody safe and moving forward, right, in the same direction. And we use the vision project that Laura's talking about. We've actually incorporated elements of that into the work that we do looking forward. So my primary role, and there's a whole part of the city that really looks forward and says, look, what are we going to be in 20 years? There's a nasty rumor out there that the city doesn't have a plan. We have no idea what we're doing. It's up to these developers and politicians. There is no plan guiding anything. Wrong. There are so many people, hundreds of people, spending their entire careers, at least at the city side, and also I want to mention all the other agencies, parks and schools as well, and special districts. These folks are planning in the future all the time. It's their full-time job. Essentially, what is a vision for 20 years? And that is not done in a vacuum. That is done with people that live here. And a lot of people who are not from here say, oh, that's not true, you're crazy. I think for folks that have been around and know the processes that the city has run, they would know that you come into this process, it listens to you, it guides, you help guide it. Now, of course, we all don't get along here, right? So we're kind of our own worst nightmare, in a sense, but we convene the process to create that 20-year plan. And that 20-year plan guides us. It's not only land use, but it's also infrastructure. Water, sewer, transportation. These things are linked together. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation, millions and millions of dollars spent to create these visions, and then that aligns all the development codes and all those other codes, so that as the city builds piece by piece and bit by bit and bit by bit, it gets to a vision. And there's a visual representation of what that vision is up to the year 2028. It's a very busy map. We don't expect you to get it. I just want you to know it's there. You can find it on our website. And quickly, we're expecting to go up in the middle of the city. We're going to be 4, 6, 7, 8 stories in the core of the city. And we're also going to expand. We have expanded. And those areas will be complete neighborhoods. So these are areas where you can walk, bike, you can shop, you can go to school. Parks are a huge part of this as well. In other words, as we're adding areas to the city, these are places where you can work, you can play, you can live, you can take your kids to school. So in essence, that's the long-range planning kind of 20-year vision. Tell me, what exactly is going on with your vision project?
Thank you. Great segue. So the Bend Vision Project, that's really what I want to talk to you about today. You know, growth is on the minds of all residents in our community. And so the Bend Vision Project, we are currently underway, and it's an 18-month community engagement effort to basically create a long-range vision for where we want our community to be in the next 10, 20 years down the road. for those of you who are not really familiar with visioning and what visions represent for a community, a vision is really like a roadmap to your desired destiny. It really is the North Star for the community that defines where you want to go, like I said, a couple decades down the road. And so you use that to guide all the planning and policy making and so on for your community so that you get where you actually want to go. Some of you have probably heard the saying that a plan is like a roadmap to your desired destiny, and if you don't have a plan, you'll end up somewhere, but probably not where you want it to be. And so the vision really is that particular document for your community. What we will get when we're finished with the vision project, we're going to have a few outcomes, and I really appreciate the things that other people have said tonight because they've already touched on these things. We're going to, through all this community input, we are going to be able to provide for the community some core community values statements. We will have a vision statement document that really is organized into 5 priority areas that rise to the surface from all the community input. And those priority areas basically are going to say what the community thinks we really need to work on to make the Bend area a great place for everybody over the next many, many years. And then we will also have at the end of this project a 5-year action plan. It's just the first action plan of probably several to come, but that action plan will it basically is like the work plan for the vision for our community of what we need to do coming together as community leaders, community members to work towards making that vision a reality. That's what will come out of this 18-month process when we're finished. So back to you, Brian.
Thank you. All right, so here's the when. And there's not really a rumor, it's more of a wish. When will it stop? When will the growth stop? I got here, I'm here. When will it stop? Which is actually kind of funny when you think about that. And Damon did a great job of the history of population growth. So there are 2 charts here. One, essentially from the 70s all the way up to 2020. I think what's interesting, his information was every 10 years, the census. There have been dips in our population annually, at least predicted by the Portland State University, and these are around big recessions. So I'm not going to say that growth cannot stop. It can, and it typically does around big economic disturbances. There are forecasts for growth going forward. That's shown on the right. And as Damon mentioned too, our average rate of growth is actually declining, so that's that little skinny line. The other line going up is essentially showing that, the state is predicting that Bend is going to hit 200,000 people by 2072. Oh, why does that matter? And they're just predicting this. Well, that drives a whole bunch of work that the city has to do. If the state tells us we're going to get this much growth, it's our job as a city to essentially meet the state law and then accommodate that growth. You can't make it stop. You can't stop that. It's a matter of law. And how you get involved is essentially to help the city, help the community, help all these special districts through also Envision Project and all these projects is to say, this is how we want to shape this community as we grow. The state's predicting this growth. The city is here to help make that happen and do it in a way that meets our values, our goals, and what we're hoping to see for our community. Laura.
So the when for the Bend Vision Project is right now. We are in the middle of it. It's an 18-month process, as I mentioned, but fortunately right now is a great, great time to engage. We are in the phase 3, which is really all about getting community input, hearing your ideas, getting your perspectives on what you want for the future of our community. So that 3rd phase where we are right now, creating the vision, that's asking you for your opinions. And so what we need for folks to do right now is engage in our survey. It is on the envisionbend.org website. We have it in English and Spanish. I'm going to tell you some other ways to engage in this project in a couple slides. But right now, sharing your opinion on that survey really does make a difference because it will end up shaping the future of our community.
Where is the growth going to happen? And a rumor that I hear all the time, it's actually pretty funny, especially, you can tell it's because usually folks that aren't from Oregon say, someday, Brian, Bend and Redmond, they're just going to be one big sprawling mess. Well, that's Idaho or California, not Oregon. Oregon has a pretty strict land use program. And here in Bend, because our communities are so far apart, essentially each community is supposed to contain 20 years worth of growth inside an urban growth boundary, or UGB. So we predict what's going to happen in 20 years, then we plan for it. Jobs, housing, and then we do our infrastructure planning based on that. We work with schools, we work with parks, we're trying to do natural resource preservation, we're trying to protect wildlife, we're trying to address wildfire, all within that urban growth boundary. And so, don't worry, we're not going to grow into Redmond, number one. So the question is, what's going to happen within that urban growth boundary? So these two graphics here, on the left, in the middle, the dark line is the urban growth boundary, City of Bend. And then you have areas that have been essentially added to it, and areas where we expect more residential development on the far right, shown by darker colors. And then we have employment growth shown in the middle one in those kind of blue-green. Two different visions here, two different areas. So we expect more residential development, essentially in the southeast, in the core of the city, and north, areas we've added to our urban growth boundary. With employment, the city owns a large amount of land to the north called Juniper Ridge, about 500 acres, 490 some acres out there. That's going to be a major employment hub in the future, as well as other areas in the south, as well as areas over by OSU, college, and the core of the city. That's where we expect it. And for folks that have not ever really seen an urban growth boundary, you want to feel it, drive out east. Go out on Highway 20. Go past the shopping center. Go past Worthy Brewing. And we always orient by breweries in Bend. So go past the brewery, and all of a sudden you go, what just happened? You just passed through the urban growth boundary. That is the land, that's right at that line. And take a look. On the left, urbanized, parcelized city. Once you get past that line, no infrastructure, no water, no sewer, and you don't see those roads and you don't see the density. That's urban growth boundary, and you can feel it out there. So why the Greater Bend vision, Laura?
You just switch the slide. So I really just put this in here because Brian was following this structure, and I didn't really know what to say because it's the Bend Vision Project. But thanks to Kelly, she provided this picture for me from the Historical Museum, and Kelly does sit on our board, so thank you, Kelly. But Bend really always has planned for growth, and she mentioned that we were hoping to be at 100,000 in 1937. We just got there. But aside from that, really, we have structured this vision project to be focused on the Greater Bend area. And that's a pretty nebulous definition there, because we understand that the city of Bend's influence goes way beyond the technical borders of our community. In fact, we're sitting here in Tethrow tonight, and we are not in the city of Bend. So not all of you necessarily know that. So we wanted to make sure that we were including people who live close into the city of Bend, people who commute to our community to work in Bend, people who use our health services, go to our schools, and so on. So this project is indeed focused on the Greater Bend area. That's, I guess, what I can say about where for my project.
Which I do think is important, by the way, because we have a city, we have a county, each is doing their own planning, and there are very few organizations that are really in between. So I really appreciate that and what they're doing to pull this common vision together to inform both the city and the county. So why is it growing? And I've had people actually ask me, why can't you make it stop? Make it stop. Why can't the city make it stop? Well, if the city did that as a pattern in practice, we'd be in a moratorium. If we were in a moratorium, that would be illegal. And then we would have to essentially find out how to get out of that moratorium. We just would have wasted taxpayers' dollars getting to the same point. So instead, we just comply with the law and we try to accommodate that growth. But why? I mean, there are a million answers to this. This is just my spin on it. Why? Well, in the US, you can pick up and move wherever you want, whenever you want. So we have no power to keep people out. We don't build walls to keep people in. Bend is on the map. We are on how many top 10 lists are we on? Top 10 beers, top 10 ski, top 10 mountain, top 10 dog, right? So we're on a national map. So there's a tremendous amount of demand because it's a lovely place and we all love being here and we don't want to move once we get here. So that leads to the second graphic there, which is the annual net migration. So how many people are moving here? And you can see the boom and bust cycle of the last recession. You can see that on that. But essentially, it's always positive. People are always moving here, right? And you can see what's projected forward, more migration. And by the way, we are at a crossroads demographically. Our death rate is now or just about to exceed our birth rate. So without that in-migration, we begin to decline. So that plus the fact that the state makes us plan for our housing every 8 years, we are in a cycle, essentially. We're in high demand, we're growing, in-migration, we plan for it, we plan for the growth, we accommodate the growth, it allows more growth. That's why I can't make it stop, and I don't think anyone can. It's about really pulling together to figure out how to make this growth really work for everybody. So, Laura?
So I'm getting the signal that we're getting the hook soon, so I'm going to shorten my comments.
We're getting the hook.
But I will say the reason why we're doing the visioning project is because we know visioning works. Forward-thinking, proactive communities do it to shape their future rather than letting their future happen to them. So I will leave it at that for now. Back to you.
And how? How can I possibly make a difference? As if there are people that have said they just simply can't. I can't make a difference. And I'll tell you how you can. Really, it's your ideas. Taking your ideas, your new energy. Step one, taking that. And then number two, working with the city and all the processes that Eric King mentioned and the Envision Project to actually share those ideas. In the city's case, if you influence the city, you're changing the regulations, you're changing our vision, you're changing our policies, you're changing our plans, you're changing our regulations. That then guides private development and how the city's run. I see it all the time, and I don't even know what to do without people who are contributing. I wouldn't know what to do if all that input and all those ideas went away, because we rely on it so heavily. Also, just a real quick, how are things going to change? I expect Bend to become more urban. It's very clear from the state that they are expecting us to become more urban. State rules are changing. So areas like downtown, what you see downtown there, 4, 5, 6 stories, expect that, more of that in the center of the city. Very simple. Laura?
Okay, so here's my quick plug to get how you get involved in the Visioning Project. There's a bunch of information up here for you. And I really want to emphasize that our survey is open until October 31st. So please, tonight, take the survey, do it tomorrow. It's really important that we hear from really diverse perspectives, lived experiences, to make sure we have all those great ideas on the table when we're creating this vision. So please take the survey right away. The other thing is that we have public workshops where you can engage in a facilitated conversation about our future on our website, and we also have focus groups. And if you identify with one of the communities of interest for the focus groups, please sign up for those too. We're trying to make sure that we really tap into perspectives and opinions and experiences that aren't always presented in these kind of processes. So please join those conversations. Last and not least by any means is in January, we will be assembling volunteer teams to help shape that 5-year action plan. Essentially the work plan of what we're going to do for the first 5 years in implementing this vision. And we need volunteers to work with our consultants to help us build that work plan and define how we're going to try to make that vision become, start marching towards that vision to become our reality. So please, if you're interested in that, contact information right there. But I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention all the other nonprofits that exist in this community. We have a very, very, very healthy nonprofit community. volunteering, as you've heard from many others, is part of the ethos of this community. Giving your time and your treasure to make Bend a better place for everybody who lives here is really what we're all about. There are affordable housing nonprofit organizations, there are environmental ones, there are recreational ones, there are service clubs. Please find the thing that works for you. It's out there. If it's not out there, you can form it and get involved and make Bend, shape Bend to be a great place for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Telena just wanted me to let you know that we have all this information for you later. We'll send out a follow-up email with all these connections. But with that, wow, that was like a master class in what Bend is. So we packed like 6 months of education into like hour and 48 minutes. So I thank you for your patience. That was a lot of fun. I'd be remiss, if you want to learn more, bend101.org/resources. We got QR codes. And then I forgot to thank our sponsors at the beginning. So I will close on thanking them. Our group over at Cascade Hassan, Sotheby's, the Ladd Group, Central Oregon Association Realtors, Bend Broadband, City of Bend, Tethero, the Bulletin, which has helped tell the story for the history of Bend. That is the written history that we have at Bend. The Bend Chamber, Telena, you've done an amazing job. Cyrus, thank you. Opportunity Knox, thank you. Michelle and the High Desert, and Anna is, I guess, leaving our board. But anyways, thank you. I'm very grateful for all your time. I know all the time you spent away from your families and children and parents and friends this evening. So I'll close on that. Have a good night. Thank you.